The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Dean Vorathsel read it twice, then set it on his desk with the careful precision of someone who had already made up his mind. Outside his office window, the Selim Academy sprawled across a plateau of pale stone, 500 students from 31 species, all enrolled in the galaxy's most prestigious interspecies curriculum. A perfect record of 0 fatalities. A perfect record he intended to keep. He pressed the "Send in student Marin." Marin Cho arrived without knocking. She never knocked. Vorathsel had learned, in the 8 months since her enrollment, that this was not rudeness. It was simply that humans processed social signals differently when they were not afraid of what was on the other side of the door. She was small by human standards, he understood. Brown skin, dark hair pulled back in a loose knot, a healing scratch across one forearm that she had not bothered to cover. She sat without being invited and folded her hands in her lap. Beside her, the creature settled onto the floor. Vorathsel made himself not look at it directly. He had tried the first week of term, and it had looked back in a way that made his secondary heart skip. It was called a dog. Marin had named this one Yuja, a word from one of her homeworld's older languages. She had explained cheerfully, meaning something like the one who stays. It was large for its kind, apparently. Black and tan, with a blunt head and a chest like a barrel, a working breed. Marin had brought documentation. Certified emotional support animal, Deathworld origin companion license, full vaccination records for every pathogen catalog in the interstellar registry. "Miss Cho," Vorathsel began. "I know why I'm here," she said. He slid the incident report across the desk. Student Prethanu was hospitalized for respiratory distress. Student Kaliv suffered a stress fracture to 2 of his secondary limbs. A third-year lab was destroyed. Marin looked at the report. "The lab wall fell because Prethanu's gas cloud ignited the solvent I was using. That was his fault. The stress fracture happened because Kaliv grabbed my arm without warning and I deflected. That was a reflex." She met Vorathsel's 4 eyes evenly. "I filed a counter-report." "You did." He had read it. It was precise, well-evidenced, and almost certainly accurate. It did not matter. The council reviewed both reports. Their decision is final. Selim Academy is not equipped to manage the liability of a Deathworld origin student in a general population environment. Your enrollment is terminated, effective tomorrow morning. Silence. Marin did not cry. He had half expected her to. The other human he'd enrolled 3 years prior had wept openly, which had been uncomfortable for everyone, but had at least felt like a recognizable response. Marin simply sat, and her expression went through something he could not read at all. Then she nodded once, "Okay." She stood. Yuja stood with her, fluid and immediate, as if they shared a single nervous system. Vorathsel felt the knot in his chest loosen. It was always harder when they accepted it quietly. He reached for the formal discharge packet. "I'll need you to sign." Yuja moved to the door. Not aggressively, not with any sound or display of threat. The dog simply walked to the office door, sat directly in front of it, and did not move. Vorathsel blinked all 4 eyes. "Miss Cho." "He does that sometimes," Marin said. She had not moved from her spot in front of the desk. She was looking at Yuja with an expression Vorathsel could not interpret, something between exasperation and affection, and a third thing he had no category for. "Please remove your animal from the door." "Yuja," Marin's voice was calm, unhurried. "Come." Yuja turned his head toward her. His tail moved once, slowly, like an afterthought. Then he turned back to the door and sat down more firmly, as if he had considered her instruction and respectfully declined. Vorathsel's secondary hearts did the skipping thing again. "Miss Cho, I must insist." "He's not blocking you," Marin said. "He's blocking me." She tilted her head. "He's done this twice before. Once when I was about to step onto ice that looked solid but wasn't. Once when I was going to take a transport that had an engine fault I didn't know about. She paused. He's picked up on something. He's telling me to stay. The dean stared at the dog. The dog did not stare back. It was simply present in front of the door, enormous and immovable, with the complete moral certainty of something that had never in its life doubted its own judgment. Animals do not, Vorethsel said carefully, detect administrative injustice. No, Marin agreed, but they detect distress, and they're very good at knowing when leaving is wrong. She sat back down in her chair without being asked. Tell me about the third thing. He blinked. I beg your pardon. The incident report lists 2 students. You said a third-year lab was destroyed. That's property, not people. She folded her hands again. But you led with the students. You're a thorough administrator. I've read your record. If property damage were your primary concern, you would have listed it first. So there's a third thing. Vorethsel said nothing. Prethanu has been in 3 incidents this year, Marin said. Her voice was still calm. It was starting to unsettle him in a new way. None of them were recorded in his file. Caleb's stress fracture, his species heals that in 4 days. He'll be fine by Thursday. But a lab destroyed means a class disrupted, which means a curriculum gap, which means someone's research timeline is off. She looked at him. What was in the lab? The silence stretched. Viral Tor's long cycle experiment, Vorethsel said finally. He did not know why he said it. 18 months of growth data, irreplaceable. She's a finalist for the Cashin grant. He stopped. That information is not. I can fix it, Marin said. He stared at her. I was in the lab when the wall came down. I kept the data core. It was a reflex. You grab what's important when something collapses. That's just. She made a small, frustrated gesture. It's a Deathworld thing, I know, but the core is intact. I have it in my room. I can hand it to Viral Tor directly and her timeline stays whole. Yuja's tail moved again, still slow, still certain. You kept it, Vorethsel said, in the explosion. It was on the edge of the table. I grabbed it on my way down. She said this the way someone might mention they'd picked up a dropped pen. I was going to report it this afternoon, before your letter arrived. Vorethsel looked at the dog. The dog continued to sit in front of the door, with the patience of something that had decided it could wait considerably longer than any administrator could. He thought about Viral Tor, who had come to his office 2 days ago with 8-limbed hands shaking, who had not yet been told there was no recovering her data. He thought about Marin Cho, who had filed a precise, well-evidenced counter-report, who had walked into his office without knocking because she was not afraid of what was on the other side, who had caught a data core in an explosion and called it a reflex. He thought about the third-year incident reports he had quietly buried, because Prethanu's family funded the Eastern dormitory renovation. The council's decision, he said slowly, can be appealed, with new evidence. He folded his hands on the desk. A recovered data core would constitute significant new evidence, as would a thorough review of the prior incident record. Marin said nothing. She waited. This would take some time, Vorethsel continued. A week, perhaps 2, during which your enrollment status would be suspended rather than terminated. A technical distinction, but a meaningful one. Yuja, Marin said. The dog stood, stretched once in the long-bodied way of his kind, and walked back to her side. He sat beside her chair and leaned his weight against her leg, warm and solid and deeply satisfied with the outcome. Vorethsel released a long breath from 3 of his 4 lungs. The data core. Bring it to my office by end of day. I will handle the rest. I will, Marin stood. At the door she paused. He's never wrong, she said. For what it's worth, in 3 years Yuja has never been wrong about when to stay. She left without knocking on the way out either. Vorethsel sat in the quiet office and looked at the door for a long time. Then he opened the incident file on Prethanu and began, for the first time, to actually read it. Yuja got an extra meal that night. Marin told him he hadn't done anything, that she'd had it handled. He wagged his tail slowly, with the air of someone who had heard this argument before and remained entirely unconvinced.